Well, I talked to Gitta, called her up a couple of months ago, and said, would you be willing to come out here? And the minute I engaged in conversation, I knew that she would be the right one for us. Terrific article about her in the paper a couple of weeks, or about a week ago. And in it, she points out that she is a survivor. She is a piece of history. Her road to recovery, her redemption, and her story of forgiveness, I think you will appreciate today. So I'd like to introduce to you Gitta Ryle.
How do I start? I don't have a script, so I just kind of talk and have some pictures to share. The way I started this was many years ago. My niece Sharon teaches at an alternative school in Santa Cruz, California, and she was teaching her class the Holocaust. So she asked my sister Renee and I to come and talk about our time during the war. And that was really the beginning. And my sister talked all about the dates when we left. She's 3 years older than I. Renee was 10 and I was 7 when we were separated from our family. So she kind of more mentioned the dates, and I more talked about how I felt emotionally about what was going on. So anyway, that was our first time, and the students appreciated it and asked a lot of questions. But my sister was not willing to talk about it anymore. She was not comfortable. But I continued to do it, and I've been busy mainly talking to schools. I talk at middle school, high school, colleges, anybody that hears and is studying either psychology, trauma, or the Holocaust. And in middle school, the students read Anne Frank. And I've been going to one school for 8 years, every year, new students, to 2 English teachers, and the kids from the previous year say, oh, you gotta be sure that Gitta comes. So I'm kind of a fixture now, and I feel kind of a purpose for me to do this, because it's important. My story is just a story. Everyone has a story. But the idea that we pass on something that hopefully people will never forget, because it was horrific. So anyway, this was an old picture that was printed in the Santa Cruz Sentinel. So this is a passport, which I have copies of the inside, so we can pass it around. That was done when the Germans came into Austria. Anyway, flip to the next page. And so this is kind of what was in the article. And but mainly that where I live, and my family, and my husband a little bit, which sadly is not here any longer. But oh yeah, so anyway, so the one reason that I do this is that I go to the schools and I tell the kids that I survived World War II, and that meeting me, that they can tell whoever, wherever, whenever in the future, that if they deny that there was a Holocaust, that they met someone alive, and that can say, yes, it happened, and they cannot be denied. And, you know, I'm sadly to say there's already people now in some parts of the States and other countries that deny that it happened. So everyone I touch and everyone I meet, I give them the job of saying, you meet me, you can touch me, you can hug me. The students love to get pictures. The idea is that never forget that there was such a time and how many people were lost. And they will continue to pass on that message. And I meet the students that now graduate college, and they remember, but you never forget. Do I forgive Hitler? Of course not. But I'm not letting the Nazis hurt me by holding on to my anger and I was angry, I was vengeful, I wanted to die, I wanted to kill. All of those things I learned that I had to let it go for me to be able to survive in this world. So that was a big, big lesson when, as I will tell you the story, I did therapy to get. So that's another thing that I try and tell the students, okay? So now I'll show you some pictures and go ahead. Oh, this is just a picture of when I go to the schools. Next one. So I was born in Vienna in April 10th, 1932. And my mother and father and my sister, Renee, who was 3 years older. And we lived a middle-class life, loved Vienna. My mother was a fantastic cook and baker, and my dad worked. And just realized lately that as a child, I remember that my mother was always with Renee, and I always felt like my dad loved me more. I never said this before, by the way, I'm adding it. That's why I don't have a script, I just talk. So I used to remember that mother was more distant and dad was always with me. And I realized that my sister Renee had 3 large illnesses during the war, before the war. She had diphtheria, polio, and I never remember the third one. Any of her kids remember? Anyway, so my mother had to be with her. My mother had to take care of her, and they were gone a lot because some of the stuff, you know, I couldn't be around. I had to be with my grandparents and my dad. So I'm digressing, but anyway, when I met my mother again after the war, it was like, but she didn't like me as much as Dad, you know, I was young. Anyway, the beauty of this, inserting this, is that I now understand why it all happened. So anyway, we lived a middle-class life, and lots of music and stuff. Okay, so in next one. Okay, so that's me at 5 years old and Renee at 8. And next one. This is my favorite cousin Martin on my father's side. And he was about, I think, a year older than I. And we had good times before the war. He was taken and he died in Auschwitz, we found out later. And so did his parents and my father. The reason I always mention him is because we had a bat mitzvah of my youngest grandson, and we honored him as he did not have a bat mitzvah. And it was really beautiful. We had a chair for him, I got a shawl and everything, and my grandson, whose bar mitzvah it was, will always remember and has the things of him when the anniversary comes up. So, okay, next is my grandparents. That's my grandfather, who Rita mentioned that they couldn't get out, and my grandmother, because of his eyesight. He was also a wonderful musician. And they were, later on we found out that they were taken to Friedrichstadt and they died there. And then there we see him playing his upright bass. And I think the orchestra, they had it in Poland and then later in Vienna. And it was, I think, some family members and some not. But I don't know any of them but my grandpa. So, okay, and that's my dad and my mom. And, okay, next one. Okay, so here we are. Hitler decided to come into power, and it was a time where I guess all of Europe was kind of depressed, and he somehow was able to mesmerize some of the Germans. I always tell the students that everything is a yin and yang in life. We've got good and bad every place. There were Germans that didn't believe in Hitler, and there was the Gestapo and the Nazis who did. So he got enough of them convinced to follow him, and he promised that they're going to make life better for them, and he wants to conquer all of Europe, and his second mission was to destroy every Jew. So he took over, as you see, Germany first, and then we were the closest. Austria was the closest country. So they came in, and Austria was also kind of, you know, they didn't have an army to fight or anything, so they kind of said, well, let's see, maybe he'll make life better for us. So they came in, and that's when again, there wasn't that much mention about the Jews, which was interesting. It was more about, we're going to make life better and get jobs for you and all that. And when they came in, we all had to register. The next one. So there is the inside of the original. Janine, I have the original, they call it visa, passport, whatever. And where everyone had to register, just like, you know, we register here. And nobody thought anything of it till, you know, later on we realized the J was for the Jew. So he had a good census of who we were. So, so as soon as they started picking up the Jewish people, my dad and some of his friends said, we better get to Belgium and settle down and then bring our families. So my dad, who I was very, very close to, and my dad was very religious, by the way, and so I did remember going to temple with him, and he did his prayers every morning and stuff. So he said goodbye to us, and he says, as soon as I get settled, we'll be together again. But as a child, I didn't understand that. I was very upset that he was leaving. I didn't understand what was going on, and I know my mother was very nervous. And the other thing I remember is that, again, like with Rita, my mother was blonde with blue eyes, and so was Renee. And so they could go out and they wouldn't take their pass, they would go out and get food. But whenever anybody came to the apartment, my mother said, hide in the closet, don't answer the door, they shouldn't see you, because I was dark and I guess I looked Jewish. So that's all I remember, was that the time, after my dad left especially, that I had to hide. And I thought I was a good little girl, and said, you know, it was very difficult and it was very confusing. So anyway, then, so my dad left, and Krishnacht came about, and then my mother had to make a decision. Oh, she thought she had to make a decision. And the decision was that she had heard, I think the next one shows you over there. There were two organizations. One was called the Kindertransport, which you may have heard of, that Jewish children from Germany and Austria were sent to England, and they were adopted and raised and so on. And then the Œuvre au Secours des Enfants was a French one that was started by the Rothschilds of Paris, plus other wealthy Jewish families of Switzerland, put money together to take as many kids out of Austria and Germany, Jewish kids. So my mother went and signed us up. And one incident that happened, that we had to go and sign, that's the only time I could go out of the apartment, was to sign for the papers, for the Osé. And that was the day that Hitler was parading on the main drag. And so my mom says, just do what everybody does. So we all had to do Ryle and, you know, not be suspicious. Anyway, so we went to that office, we signed the papers, and I guess Hitler was marching, but I didn't know who he was. I just saw a man in a uniform doing Ryle, you know. So we went back, and then Mother packed us a bag, and in, was it March of 39, she took us to the train and said goodbye to my mom, to my sister and I. We had a little bag, I think, and I was very scared. And my folks had told Renee that if anything happened, that she had to take care of me. So she, all of a sudden, had to be a caregiver. And 10 years old, I can imagine. We've talked some, and must have been very scary also for her. Anyway, and she says I was pretty mischievous because I was an angry little girl, so I gave her a hard time, I guess. Anyway, so here we are on a train, knowing nobody, and they take us to France. We arrive in Paris, and then the main organization took us to the first children's home, which were all Jewish people who took care of us, and that was Helvetia. So this was a villa that was owned by the Rothschilds, and they made it into a children's home. So there, this was before the Germans came into Paris, so we were actually had kind of fun. You know, we were all with kids. We didn't speak a word of French, and they told us, if you can't talk French, don't talk. So, because they wanted us not to speak German. So we talked with our hand, whatever, but that's what happened. So the main reason was there to learn French. And then on the weekends, I think the next page shows, yeah, we entertained people. Jewish families came from Paris and brought us goodies, and then we entertained them, did little dances and stuff, and they told us, don't worry, the war's going to be over real soon, you'll be back with your parents. So we said, you know, figured there's hope, right? Okay. So the next thing happens that Hitler takes over Paris. So as soon as he came into Paris, we had to move. Next one, I think. Okay, so from there, we had to go to the center of France. And this chateau, Majolier, was still where we were all Jewish kids. In another place, we were maybe 150 kids. There, we were closer to 400. It was huge, and a lot of kids, and I didn't like it. It was damp, and there wasn't that much food, and you know, we got sick a lot. It was, I don't remember it being a very good place, and I didn't care for it. And Renee actually started, there was so much sickness that she started helping the doctors and nurses, and eventually she became a nurse, which was interesting. But that was her beginning of being exposed to health stuff. Okay, so this is actually, so what happened is in the Majolier we were divided in 3 groups. There were the older kids, middle groups, and younger. Renee was in the middle group, and I was always in the younger group, thank you. Anyway, so we were there till the Germans came, and they actually came to the chateau. They took some of our teachers, they took the older kids. Oh, this is Anna Lupa, was one of our favorite teachers. She sadly was a fighter, and she was killed. And then somehow, I can't tell you how, they took the middle group and the younger group, they took us out, and we went down to Marseille, excuse me. Okay, so the thing that happened is an incident that happened at Majolier, that my dad somehow found out where we were. So he came to the area and got a job at a retirement type home, just doing anything, and he came to see us. And I remember we were called up from the mess hall, and they said, come to the front. And there comes my father, up the steps of the chateau. And he was very dark, he was very tan and pure white hair. And Renee said, that's not Dad. She didn't first recognize him, but then, well, as soon as he hugged us and kissed us, naturally it was Dad. And it was like, okay, now everything's gonna be fine. And it was wonderful. And so he came a few weekends to see us, and then we didn't see him anymore. We found out later that, as I said, the yin and yang of people, there were French people who later on saved our lives, and there were French people who wanted jobs, and they denounced my father. And he was picked up, put in a French concentration camp in Drancy, and from there, he was, the other picture shows, I guess, the train that they took to Auschwitz, and I cannot imagine how they survived even that. And so, anyway, so that was the last time we saw him. And we had really no idea where our mother was at first. And yeah, this is, I think, a good picture that shows, and that's the entrance of Auschwitz. I don't know if any of you have been to Auschwitz. Yeah, I have not been, so. Anyway, so what happened next, from the Majolier, when the Germans came, they took us to Marseille, which was a port, that 3 ships were leaving, 2 for America and 1 for Israel. So the one for America left and Israel left, and there was 1 ship left, and we were going to be on it. We were ready to board the ship, and the Germans came into Marseille. So they told us we cannot get on the ship because if we do, they'll blow it up because they know it's Jewish kids. So we had to hide again. So from that point on, the Jewish organization couldn't keep us anymore. They said, we will watch over you, but we have to place you in a Catholic convent. So I don't know where other kids were placed, but a few of us went to a Catholic convent, and there it was very interesting. I liked it, but my sister didn't, because it was so interesting, because it was the first place since I left my family that there was a routine. You know, we had our meals, and we went to church twice a day, and we had chores, and I felt like, you know, this makes more sense than, you know, what I'm running around and not knowing, you know, what the next thing comes. So, anyway, so that's the Mother Superior, and the youngest nun is between Renee and me, and I stayed in touch with her till she died. Wonderful. She was, I think, 17 when we were there. So when I met her as an adult, we were more like sisters than, you know, But anyway, so we stayed there, and then the Germans started coming into the convents even. I mean, they were really they know that French people were hiding kids. And their goal was still to kill as many kids, because then there would be no future. Anyway, so when it got bad there, Mother Superior called us in. And by the way, only the father and Mother Superior knew we were Jewish. None of the sisters, none of the kids. We were orphans. We had false papers that we were born in Alsace-Lorraine in case we had an accent. And so, you know, that's the way it was there. So she said, you know, if you want to stay with us, then, you know, you can stay with us. But if you don't, we have to find another place for you because it's not safe for us or you. So Renee was told by my parents that to never leave me out of her sight. And the other thing is, if you can't make a decision about something, that you have to check with your father first. So Mother Superior was wise enough, and she says, okay, we will find you a place. So the next place was the farms. So my sister was in one farm and I was in the other, and that was outside of the town of Romans. And there we stayed till the end of the war. And my family was a mother and a father, 3 daughters. One was older than me, one was my age, and one was younger. And as I said, I was very confused, because remember, I've had nothing up to that time that made any sense, you know. I really didn't want to live. when we were, my sister, by the way, was in a wonderful family with a mother and a father and a brand new baby girl born. We couldn't be together because it was too dangerous. If the Germans found us, they would kill us and the families who took care of us. So till the Germans came all over the place, I saw Renee once in a while, but after that, we didn't. And that was the first time I was separated from her. And I was angry. I was very angry, and I didn't want to live. And I just thought, you know, and there were things that happened when we were on the farm because they were bombing. And that was the first time that I really understood what a war was, because before we were just running. This time they were bombing, they were shooting, the Americans came in, they were on one side of the highway, the Germans on the other, they'd shoot each other, then we'd see bodies on the road, we'd have to hide in caves and stuff. And so I just said, I've had it, you know, I didn't want to live. I wanted to die. And with the kids we used to talk, you know, if they come any closer, we'll just kill ourselves. I mean, that was really the feeling, because there was nothing to hold on to. I didn't know where my parents were. I figured we'd never see them again. So it was just Renee and me, and whatever there was, right? So anyway, I want to tell you about my mom. I want to finish that we stayed at the farm till the end of the war. Okay. My mother, meanwhile, was in Vienna, and she answered, there were people from all over Europe trying to get people out of Germany and Austria to give them jobs. And so she saw an ad in England that they needed a cook. And so she answered it in German, because she didn't speak a word of English. And they sent her a ticket, and she went to England. So my mother stayed all the war years in England, cooking and baking. And she was in touch with the OSE through the Red Cross of Switzerland. And so there were letters back and forth that they told her, your girls are fine, they're in the center of France, in the south of France, and all that. And, but we never were in touch with her because that was too dangerous for us to know where she was, you know. So we didn't know till after the war. So that was my mama. Oh, my mother, again, she was an unbelievable woman. She went, a few years before she died, she wanted to go to France and meet the two families that, you know, helped us. And she wanted to say thank you for saving her girls. And she went, not speaking a word of French, but she cooked and baked. They had a peach farm, an apricot farm, so language was no problem. So that was a picture that was wonderful, that she was able to do that. So then after the war, they came to the farms, and, well, the OSE came, took us to Paris, then told us about our mother, where she was, and they had no information about my dad. And we took a little boat across the channel and met my mother. And I remember, now, I was very confused, and I think I turned 14 when I came to America. So, these were just letters of the Red Cross. But this just shows the information we got after the war, where people had been deported and died. So, here we are. I meet my mother, and I said to Renee, I don't know what I'm going to say. First of all, I forgot all my German, so I only spoke French. Renee still remembered her German, so she had to translate. So I couldn't even talk to my mother for a while, which was good, because I was, you know, I felt like she abandoned me. I was an angry little girl, and I didn't understand, and I thought, you know, I didn't do anything wrong. And so a lot of this feeling was still, you know, with me for a long time. So anyway, naturally my little German came back, and I was able to communicate with her. So we were in England for I think about 6 months or so, waiting for our visa to come to America. We were sponsored, again, by some of the wonderful Opperman cousins. And as I tell the students, I said, you know, when we wanted to come to America, we had to have a visa. We just couldn't come. And someone had to sponsor us so that the government wouldn't have to take care of us. So anyway, so we got our visa and we came to New York. Actually, what's today is the 9th. On the 11th, which is Tuesday, Armistice Day or Veterans Day, is when my sister and I and my mom landed in New York, November the 11th, 1946. Can you imagine how long that was? And they tell me I still have an accent, so what can I do? So it was an amazing, amazing day. The people my mother worked for were a wealthy family, and they paid for my sister and I for the ship voyage with the Queen Elizabeth, second voyage after World War II. So here we were on this fancy ship, and ate everything in sight and stuff. But it was interesting. So we landed in New York, and from New York, my Aunt Sally was there, and we stayed overnight in New York, and then she took us to Detroit. And we lived there for 4 years, and my mother right away got a job cooking, baking, in the hotels. And that's when I met my first cousin, David, who's here now. And it was interesting. We went to school, and they put us in, I think, for a month into a middle school, and then they put us in high school. We didn't speak a word of English. So here I was in a Jewish Central High School in Detroit, a Jewish school, and the kids were really mean. They bullied us. We were few foreigners, because we didn't speak English, and we were foreigners, and we were weird. And so I came home to my mom. I said, okay, that's it, I'm done. This place isn't for me. I said, the Germans, the non-Jewish people didn't like, the Germans wanted to kill me, and now the Jews don't like me. So I was pretty messed up. So anyway, but I did not like high school, but I somehow made it through. It was difficult not speaking English. I always say they put me, my sister wanted to be a nurse, so they knew what she wanted to be. They looked at me and they said, oh, she's cute, she'll get married, just let her go secretary. So they put me in shorthand. Can you imagine? Does anybody remember shorthand? Without speaking English? Anyway, so that was my experience. Okay. So here we are in Detroit, and my mother, wonderful, wonderful lady, after 4 years in Detroit, she says, I don't know if we came to America to live here. So she had a wonderful cousin, Ida Brona, in Culver City, and she says, I'm going to take the train to California and see cousin Ida, and I'll let you know if things work out here, you can come. So I finished school. I think I was in business school at Wayne University at the time. So anyway, mother called me and she said, this is why we came to America. This is paradise. Okay, so in July of '51, I took the train by myself. My sister stayed in Detroit because she was the first Jewish student accepted at the Harbor Nursing School in Detroit. So she broke the spell too. Yeah. And she was a fantastic, very good nurse. Okay, so here we are. We are now, I'm in Culver City, and I got a job, and my mother right away got a job, and we lived together, and we really got to know each other. I kind of took care of the house, and she took care of the cooking, and she never learned how to drive, so I was her driver, and I learned to drive. Wonderful times. So, next thing happens is my mother said before she died she would like my sister and I to be married. And so anyway, my sister met her husband, who was a doctor, and she got married, and I said, no, I don't want to get married. I was fine. I said, don't need to. But anyway, my husband came into our lives, and my mother liked him very much. And I wasn't so sure. But anyway, it took a while, because remember, I was still kind of messed up. And I didn't know what I wanted. I wasn't sure if I trusted men, if I trusted society. So for me, it was a very difficult time. I was very fortunate that my husband knew what he wanted. And he was very persuasive, and I finally gave in. And it's the best thing that ever happened in my life. Because he allowed me to find out who I was and to try and become a happy person, because he saw that I wasn't happy. I just kind of, I feel like I existed. I did what I'm supposed to do, but I had no identity and just no substance, you know. But I was a good mother, and I was a good wife, I did what I'm supposed to do. So anyway, when my children, my first two, were close to the age that we were separated, I became very sick. I got ulcers and horrible, horrible anxiety attacks. If anybody's ever had one, they know what I'm talking about. And I didn't know what I was going to do. So the doctor said, you know, we can take care of the ulcers, but you have to see someone about your anxiety attacks. So that's when I first started going to therapy, and the first person I saw, I said, I shouldn't have survived, I should have died with everybody else, I had nightmares and everything, and I said, I'm not a good mother, I'm not a good wife, and my self-esteem was down nothing. And anyway, slowly, as I went on, as we call it, we peeled the onions, and he went deeper and deeper, and I went more into all of the stuff that as a child I saw and I got my impression of, which may not have been the proper impression, but that's all I had, was the impression of what I saw. And I mentioned that the family, the French farm that I was in, the man of the house never touched me, but he hit his family, his wife and his girls. So I saw something again that confused me, because here this man is trying to save me, and he's not a good man, you know. So let me tell you, I had a lot of work to do. Thank goodness I did, and I stuck with it. And so that's how I pretty much learned about the forgiveness. I don't know what else I forgot to say. Janine, am I getting there? Anyway, I'd love questions, if you'd like to. I feel that my purpose is to let people know that there was such a thing. My story is a story. There were people that had much worse childhoods, I talked at UC Santa Cruz with a 90-year-old man who survived a few camps, and he told his story. So, but he didn't do therapy, so he's still angry. And I'm not angry anymore. I feel like the perpetrators own what they've done, and I do not want to own it anymore. I have a content life. Didn't mention that my husband was married for 36 years, and he died of cancer. And that was really hard for me, because when we got married, I had two wishes. One was that he should cook for 6 months, because I never learned to cook because my mother was such a good cook, and then my husband liked to cook, and then I said, I want to die before you. So when he was dying, he said, at least I did one for you. And he died in my home, in our house, and I miss him every day, even though, believe it or not, it's been 21 years that he's gone. But my life is good. I live in Santa Cruz, if anybody knows where that is, a half a block from the ocean, and the ocean is my savior. I can go, I have a bench at the ocean actually I just changed the bench to a double bench, one for me later, one for him, and it's right at the ocean, and it's a healing place to be near the ocean. So, now the last thing I want to do, one more minute, anyway, I had this book from Inga Auerbacher, for many years, I don't even know who gave it to me, but she has a poem in the front that was so nice, and so I've been using it to close my talk at the schools. So I told someone about it, and his friend says, well, she's on Facebook. So I befriended her on Facebook. She lives in New York, and she gives talks all over the place, and she's written a book. She's selling her book, you know, she's redone it a few times. So I FaceTimed her, and I told her that I was reading her poem at school, and so she gave me her blessing. So that was nice. So I don't know, Janine, do you want to read it? Huh? Well, I can't see it from here. Who wants to read it? Do you want to read it out? I'll read it. Okay, I think it's beautiful, and it means a lot. Okay.
Only special children wear a star. I have noticed from near and far. They have placed a mark over my heart. I'll wear it proudly from the start. A star is a reward, so I've been told. This custom passed on from days of old. I know all that the star is revealing, but I'll try to have a better feeling. I am a star. Papa told me to avoid trouble. Come home from school on the double. To me the star's yellow is gold. I'll try not to act so bold. I stand tall and proud. My voice shouts in silence loud. I am a real person still. No one can break my spirit or will. I am a star.
And we're all okay, I think I did it.